Hi, and welcome to Reed's Audio Reading. I'm Reed, and I hope you enjoy my channel. Today I'll be reading the adventure Windchill, written by Kevin Carter. This adventure was published in Dungeon Magazine issue 77, November/December 1999. Windchill is an AD&D venture that takes place in an isolated mountain range in the DM's own campaign world. This adventure is best suited for a party of 3 to 6 characters of levels 4 to 6, about 25 total levels. At the DM's discretion, Windchill can be played as a solo adventure with one nature based PC of levels 7 to 8. A ranger or druid will be helpful but not necessary. At least one PC should possess a weapon of +1 or greater enchantment. This module, styled like a ghost story, features a new monster called a Wendigo, a wind spirit from Canadian Indian folklore. Starting the adventure. The PCs are traveling through an isolated, confurious mountain range of whatever reason the DM desires. When ready to begin the adventure, read or paraphrase the following. You have spent the better part of the day traversing the lonely crags of this secluded mountain range. The sun has begun to dip below the jagged horizon, casting great streaks of crimson and violet across the sky. Your labored breath curls in the thin air, while the temperature continues to drop. You trudge a few more paces through the knee deep snow, hoping to find a suitable campsite past the next copse of evergreen trees. Up ahead, you notice a bizarre set of tracks in the fresh snow. They originate from behind a rocky outcropping 15 yards to the east. The tracks could be human boot prints, but they are spaced too far apart. Strangely enough, a small amount of soot has settled in the depressions of the prints. As you visually follow the path of the tracks, the boot prints become farther apart until they disappear entirely. At the site of the last print, the gnarled bark of a neighboring pines bears hideous ashen burn marks. The PCs are free to investigate the footprints. The prints leading up to the burn marks are deep, as if the originator had been jumping instead of walking. The DM should reveal this information only if a successful tracking proficiency check is rolled or if a player specifically asks if there is anything peculiar about the depth of the prints. For the Dungeon Master, the eerie tracks belong to Yivin, a young warrior of the Li Kongan barbarian tribe. Yivin journeyed from the valley of his clan some 2 months ago with a sacred tribal artifact called the Tellstone, a non-magical rock that has the creation story of Li Kongan tribe etched into its smooth surface. Yivin took the Tellstone on a spiritual quest to return the stone to its legendary place of origin, the root system of the Elder Glade. This hallowed grove has long been an important local in the Li Kongan religion. Yevon, eager to prove himself, ignored the warnings of his elders and made the perilous journey on his own. Yevon's travels brought him into the territory of a Wendigo, a vampiric wind spirit. The Wendigo stalked the young warrior for days. Roughly 1 hour before the PCs arrived in the valley of the Wendigo, Yevon made his valiant last stand against the evil spirit. Yevon's bizarre footprints were the result of the Wendigo's feeding habits, as detailed in the monster's description. What is left of Yevon's camp hints on what is in store for the PCs now that they are too being hunted by the Wind Demon. The Rift of the Wendigo. The Rift of the Wendigo is a steep walled canyon nestled between several wind-swept crags. The rift itself was carved several thousand years ago by a passing glacier. The canyon is littered with huge glacial drop stones, and its steep walls are sprinkled with great evergreens. A forest of twisted birch and pine dominates the narrow valley floor. It is assumed that the PCs are traveling through the rift in either winter or early spring. The DM must modify the box text to adapt to the adventure to another season. While the PCs are traveling into the rift of the Wendigo, random encounters should not occur, as most denizens of the mountains chain avoid the haunted valley. From the moment the PCs see the tracks, they are spotted by the Wendigo, who is perched on a ledge some 200 yards away. The PCs should not be able to spot the Wendigo from their position due to its quasi-invisibility. During the adventure, the PCs may decide that the best course of action is to flee the mountains and escape the clutches of the Wendigo. This doesn't prove easy as the rift is surrounded by steep cliffs. Unless the PCs attempt a direct ascent of the icy canyon walls, the only way out of the valley is through one of the two glaciers carved passes, as shown on the map. Movement rate is reduced by half due to the thick snow and uneven terrain. At best, it will take the PCs a day to leave the valley on foot. Should the PCs actually attempt the dangerous climb of the rift walls, the DM should consult the DMG and apply the necessary climbing modifiers. The Wendigo does not hesitate to attack while the PCs are vulnerable on the cliff face. Wyvern's Camp. Following the tracks to their source is simple, as the boot prints are easily visible, even to someone with no tracking skills, in the knee deep snow. If the PCs ignore the tracks and continue on their merry way, the DM should hint to them that it would be a good idea to investigate such a strange phenomenon. If the PCs still insist on moving on, then they have missed valuable clues that could have helped them in the night to come. The DM should skip this section and continue the adventure with the Night of Wendigo section. Once the PCs have traced the tracks to their point of origin, the DM should read or paraphrase the following. The tracks originate from a small camp consisting of a wrinkled deerskin bedroll and the smoldering remains of a campfire, on top of which sits an iron kettle filled with an acrid smelling black pulp. A leather backpack slumps against the trunk of a fallen pine. Circumventing the camp is a series of upright wooden stakes driven firmly into the frozen earth. The stakes, each about 4 feet high, are carved with ornate spiral designs. The camp is perched on a rocky ledge overlooking a forlorn, snow covered meadow. The only sound that can be heard, aside from the beating of your own heart, is the distant rush of wind through the towering pine trees. The spiral design on the stakes are non magical protection runes of the Li Kongan barbarian clan. According to Li Kongan religion, these runes offer protection from storms. Wyvern carved the runes in a desperate attempt to protect himself from the Wendigo. A PC can correctly identify the markings by making a successful religion or heraldry non weapon proficiency check at a -4 penalty. The strange pulp in the kettle is a mixture called gek, a sludge commonly brewed by mountaineers because of its powerful aroma, helps to ward off mosquitoes. Any PC with a survival proficiency automatically identifies the mixture. Otherwise, a successful herbalism check does the job. PCs might find it strange to see a freshly brewed mixture, as mosquitoes are never a problem during the winter months. Wyvern brewed the Gek to defend himself from the mosquito swarms summoned by the Wendigo. Within the backpack is an assortment of odd items, including a small hatchet, two wineskins, one empty, three frozen bear steaks, 10 feet of rope, a spade, two beaver pelts, a pair of snowshoes, a small knife, an ornate seal bow necklace, 10 gold pieces worth, and the tellstone wrapped in a shroud of charcoal etched cloth. These charcoal markings are actually the hieroglyphic writing of the Li Kongan clan. The glyphs communicate the importance of the Tellstone and tell of Win's quest to bury it under the Elder Glade. See the For the Dungeon Master section for details. The PCs can decipher the meaning of the glyphs through the same methods used to identify the runes of the stakes or by casting a Comprehend Languages spell. There is also a pouch in the bottom of the backpack containing two painted wolf teeth, three onyx shavings, 20 gold pieces each, a silver ingot, 50 gold pieces, and a sprig of a raspberry bush containing five good berries given to Win by a tribal shaman. If any PC stirs up the ash in the campfire, he or she discovers that the cinders are still warm. The Night of the Wendigo. The PCs are in for a horrific night now that they have fallen into the clutches of the Wendigo. As soon as the last ray of sun disappears behind the mountainous skyline, the wind spirit begins to stalk the PCs, gauging their strengths and weaknesses while preparing for its final attack. Because the Wendigo revels in striking fear into the hearts of its victims, it attempts to scare the PCs in any way it can. The Wendigo never purposefully allows itself to be seen by its prey until it is ready to move in for the kill. As a result, the PCs should not have a clear idea about what they are up against until it is almost too late. Throughout the adventure, the Wendigo makes full use of its partial invisibility to resist any counterattack the PCs might plan. Although the Wendigo's specific tactics are detailed below chronologically, it also engages in general scare tactics throughout the night. These tactics include making faint rustling noises in the vegetation only to disappear back into the bush the second its prey spins around. The Wendigo also builds on the PC's paranoia by whispering cryptic threats with its whispering wind ability to any PC who strays from the others. Below is a rough timeline of the night's events. The time frame of the adventure can be changed according to the PC's actions or the personal preferences of the DM. The Wendigo does not engage in any scare tactics until after the first event has occurred. 8 p.m. Wolf in sheep's clothing. The DM should allow the PCs to set up camp for the night. Things are strangely quiet until about 8 o'clock, at which time a young man named Jared trots in from the dark forest, offering a friendly greeting. Jared is a husky man in his early 30s with weathered skin and thick stubble on his chin. His most striking features, however, are his vivid blue eyes. Jared, speaking in a baritone voice, claims to be a trapper who has wandered into the valley in search of fresh game. The mountain man is somewhat reserved, yet he is interested in hearing the PC's past exploits and deeds. If questioned, Jared claims to know nothing about the bizarre footprints or the abandoned camp. Jared is not who he appears to be. Ever since the PCs found the tracks, the Wendigo has been watching them from a distance, studying their strengths and weaknesses. Not satisfied with the information that could be gleaned from such a distance, it has decided to study the PCs up close. The Wendigo polymorphs into a mountain man whom it killed a few weeks ago. The Wendigo's polymorph ability is somewhat different from that of a polymorph spell. See the monster's description on page 31 for details. Using this seemingly friendly form, the Wendigo hopes to learn as much about the PCs as possible. While listening to the PC stories, the Wendigo pays close attention to their weapons and tries to gauge their abilities as best it can. After the Wendigo has gleaned significant information, Jared announces that he is going to go gather some fresh firewood only to discard the mountain man's skin some 20 yards from the PC's camp. Should the PCs conduct a search for the missing mountain man, they have a base 65% chance of finding the skin, which is hanging on a pine branch, swaying gently in the cold mountain breeze. If the PCs are hesitant to let Jared wander off by himself, the Wendigo uses its audible glamour ability to create the sound of an approaching beast. While the PCs are distracted, the wind spirit slips into the forest, discarding Jared's skin as a parameter of the PC's campsite. The Wendigo has a base 80% chance of pulling this off unnoticed. The DM should allow the Wendigo to exploit any information it learned in later encounters with the PCs. If the Wendigo is attacked while disguised as Jared, it flees into the forest, discarding Jared's skin as soon as it loses sight of the PCs. Should the PCs somehow corner the Wendigo, the Wind Spirit fights to the death. If Jared is attacked without suspicion that he is not what he appears to be, the PCs might be subject to an alignment change. 12 a.m. Ghostly Winds. The following event takes place around midnight. The DM should read or paraphrase the following to whichever PC is on watch during this time. If the PCs do not establish watch for the night, one PC should awaken to notice this strange phenomenon. The DM should also modify the following text depending on how the PCs set up their camp. The stillness of the cold mountain air has been interrupted for about the past 20 minutes by a strong, steady breeze blowing over the northern ridge. As you stare lazily into the flickering flames of your campsite, you come to a shocking realization. The flames and smoke of your fire are undisturbed by the wind. Now that you think about it, you can't even feel the breeze against your exposed cheeks, yet the wind can still be heard gusting all around you. The shock of this strange discovery allows you to shake off the drowsiness that has overtaken you during your watch. You glance upward towards the evergreen trees, silhouetted against the blue black sky. They take on a more menacing appearance. Not a single needle or branch quivers as the wind continues to sound through the air. The Wendigo, hiding some 100 yards away on a small hillock, is attempting to spook the PCs. The Wendigo uses its audible glamour ability to create the sound of wind when, in fact, the skies are calm. The wind spirit does not reveal itself nor does it attack unless found and cornered. 2 a.m. The Rain of Bones. A few hours after midnight, the Wendigo attempts another scare tactic. When the event is ready to begin, read or paraphrase the following. A sudden clattering noise emanates from the edge of your campsite. After quickly scanning the surroundings for signs of danger, you discover the grotesque source of the noise. A charred rib bone is bouncing down a large boulder. A blackened leg bone lands in the snow to your left. Suddenly, the sky bursts into a torrent of ash blackened bones. As quickly as it started, the rain of bones stops, finishing with a human skull that, after careening through the snow covered branches of the pine tree, settles at your feet. This charnel rain is all that remains of Wyvern, the Lee Kongan warrior. The Wendigo is flying some 100 yards above, dropping bones on the PCs. Should any PC flee and become separated from his comrades, the Wendigo does not miss the opportunity to attack the lone character. The Wendigo is flying high enough above the PCs that they should not be able to spot it, and the Wind Spirit transparent body is invisible at the distance greater than 50 feet. 3 a.m. A final attack. A half an hour of deathly silence settles in on the forest after the last bone falls. Once the PCs have had 3 turns to react, read or paraphrase the following. Scanning the area of the forest illuminated by your flickering firelight, you become aware of a strange buzzing in your ear. Without thinking, you swat the annoying insect away and notice that your arm is speckled with a half a dozen or so small grayish dots. You instinctively brush at your arm. Surprisingly, all the gray flecks smear into the deep crimson blood. A different buzzing noise begins to drone into your ears. This time, the humming is deeper and more hollow. It emanates from the forest, which seems to crawl as if the air itself were alive. The droning grows louder until suddenly thousands upon thousands of insects explode into the clearing and envelop you. The Wendigo summons a swarm of insects to soften up the PCs before it closes in for the final attack. The swarm numbers roughly 560,000 mosquitoes. Any PC caught with the swarm has a 90% chance per round of suffering 1 to 4 hit points of damage from blood loss. A PC may reduce the chance of 40% by hiding under a thick blanket or bedroll. The cloud is so dense that it affects the PC's perception. While in the swarm, vision is reduced to 2d 4 feet, and any noise short of thunderclap is drowned out by a horrible buzzing. Every hit point of damage delivered by the swarm kills 1 cubic foot of mosquitoes. Aside from destroying the swarm, the PCs may drive off the mosquitoes by filling their air with heavy smoke or by warming some gek, the substance found over the fire in Wyvern's camp. Any spell cast inside the swarm has a base 25% chance of being miscast, with a plus 5% modifier per point of damage sustained by the caster that round. The Wendigo lets the swarm torment the PCs for 3 rounds before it begins the real attack. If the PCs manage to clear the swarm before this time, the following description should be modified. The terrible droning noise begins to abate, only to be replaced by something more dreadful. A deep, unearthly moan filters through the buzzing of the mosquitoes as an icy wind rips through the camp. The swarm is swept up in a great gust that begins to curl around a hazy nexus. A full blown whirlwind coalesces out of the ghostly air. Pine needles, birch branches, mosquitoes, and even small rocks are swept up into the frenzy of wind. The harsh wind drives the mosquitoes from your eyes. As quickly as it started, the twister stops, leaving at its center a menacing 7 foot tall creature. The figure standing before you is a gaunt, grotesque mockery of a humanoid form, except for the creature's luminous blue eyes. Its body is a twisted collection of mosquitoes, rocks, snow, and pine needles, essentially everything that was caught up in the tornado. It stares at you for only a second with its cold azure eyes before springing forward, slashing with its obsidian claws. Initiative should be rolled for both sides, the Wendigo and the PCs. The Wind Spirit attacks the closest PC with its claws before unleashing a gust of searing wind on the second round. The Wendigo has incorporated its surroundings to make its physical body, giving it an AC of 3. Although it attacks without fear, it also knows when to retreat. If the battle goes particularly poorly for the Wendigo, that is, if it is reduced to 20 hit points or fewer, it flies straight up in an attempt to buy itself enough time to reuse its Wind Blast ability. A wendigo is a vampiric wind spirit that haunts isolated wilderness areas. Cruel hunters by nature, wendigos revel in stalking and terrorizing their prey. The hunt is often more important to the elusive spirits than the kill itself. Wendigo spirits originate from the elemental plane of air. Their true form is a non corporeal cloud of haze, a faintly humanoid shape with sky blue eyes that glow faintly from some internal light. Before entering combat, wendigos surround their non corporeal bodies with debris from their environment, giving them solid forms. The seldom heard voice of a wendigo sounds like a demonic chorus of fleeting whispers that originates from all directions at once. Other than their voices, wendigos make no sound at all, even while walking over a forest floor covered with dry leaves. Combat. A wendigo engages in direct combat only after thoroughly terrorizing its prey. Due to its transparent body, a wendigo is 95% invisible while standing still and 50% invisible while moving. At distances greater than 50 feet, a wendigo is completely invisible. It uses this power as well as its ghostly silence to stalk its prey. Before entering combat, the wendigo must spend a few seconds creating a physical body for itself. The Wendigo suffers a +2 initiative penalty on the first round of combat. It does so by weaving a whirlwind around its non corporeal form, lifting leaves, dirt, sand, rocks, or any other small objects from the surrounding environment. After a few seconds, the twirling debris coalesces into a shape of a horribly twisted and willowing humanoid. While in this form, it attacks with claws of jagged rocks or splintered wood. However, their solid state does cause wendigos to lose their silent movement. Because a wendigo creates its physical body out of pieces of its environment, it has a variable armor class ranging from 0 to 5 depending upon its surroundings. A wendigo comprised of abrasive desert sand, for example, will have an AC of 5, where the same wind spirit to create its body out of jagged mountain granite, it would have AC 0. The DM should use common sense when determining a Wendigo's AC, taking into consideration the materials available in the environment. Otherwise, a 1d6 can be rolled, subtracting 1 to determine the Wendigo's AC. Once every 3 rounds, a Wendigo can release a fiery gale with an area effect equivalent to a fireball spell, 20 feet diameter. This searing wind blast deals 5d6 points of damage, save versus breath weapon for half damage. This blast is so powerful that unless a saving throw versus paralyzation is made, man sized or smaller victims are lifted repeatedly into the air, forfeiting all actions for the rest of the round. Wendigos can cast the following spells at will as a 10th level wizard: Whispering Wind, Gust of Wind, Fly, Summon Swarm once per day, mosquitoes only. The Wendigo has the grotesque ability to seamlessly wear the skins of its victims over its non corporeal body. While wearing a humanoid skin, the Wendigo is able to assume the voice of its host. For this reason, a Wendigo can only assume the form of a humanoid creature that it has personally killed. This magical ability is similar in effect to a polymorph other spell and is utterly convincing. Once the spell's duration has expired, the skin begins to rip and fray, destroying the illusion. Habitat/society. Wendigos dwell in lonely wilderness areas. Although they are territorial, it is not uncommon for these elusive wind spirits to disappear from their usual hunting ground, only to reappear hundreds of miles away several years later. Wendigos, solitary by nature, are in a constant state of retreat from the ever advancing tide of civilization. Whenever a Wendigo is driven deeper into the wilderness, it leaves behind its own unique brand of curse, a persistent plague of mosquitoes that torment the invading settlers. According to legends, wendigos fathered the mosquito species as an act of revenge against humanoid races. Roughly once every 3 centuries, a few dozen wendigo congregate at the site of an epic winter storm. This event, seemingly religious in nature, entails the wind spirits dancing throughout the storm while chanting in their hollow, gusty voices. Aside from this dark ritual, wendigos are never found in groups. Wendigos are claustrophobic. They grow agitated if they are stuck under a roof for only a few moments, and rarely do they venture into thick forests, as trees obstruct their vision to the heavens. If they move more than 20 yards from the open sky, they are rendered powerless, and on the following round are instantly destroyed. For this reason, they are never found below ground. Ecology. Wendigos are adept hunters that stalk any intelligent being who dares venture into their wilderness. These wind spirits are vampiric, needing fresh blood to keep their vaporous bodies from disintegrating. Wendigos are patient, often stalking their prey for days before attacking. Wendigos, renowned for striking fear into their victims' hearts, especially enjoying tailing lone travelers or small groups. A common tactic of these evil wind spirits is to flit in and out of the trees behind a group of travelers, only to disappear when someone looks back. After heightening its victim's paranoia, the Wendigo begins to call softly to the travelers, so softly that its voice can barely be distinguished from a slight breeze. Only after the group is driven into a panic induced frenzy of cursing or running does a Wendigo attack. A survivor of such an attack is typically left with intense agoraphobia, breaking out into a cold sweat when the wind is heard rustling through the treetops. Concluding the adventure. This encounter could end in a variety of ways, depending on the flow of events. The dawn brings welcome relief to all who survived the night. However, if the Wendigo was not slain, then the nightmare is far from over, as it definitely returns to haunt the party in subsequent encounters. Should the PCs prove too strong for the Wendigo, it is content with simply driving the PCs out of its valley. If the PCs manage to survive the night, the DM should award 100 to 600 XP to each player, depending on whether it was hot dice or quick thinking that saved them. The encounter with the Wendigo opens the door for many future adventures. Now that the PCs have possession of the Tellstone, what will they do with it? They may sell it to a collector or an antiquarian for a good sum. A philanthropic PC might return the stone to the Lee Conagan tribe, or to take it upon him or herself to finish Wynn's quest. The DM may award a 500 XP story bonus for this. Perhaps the PC's journey to the Elder Glade only to discover that a great evil has befallen the grove DMs can use to save a forest in issue 61 for this quest. Perhaps the stone hints at a location of a great artifact within the DM's campaign. Should the Wendigo prove itself too strong for the PCs, they might find shelter in a mountain cave that the DM wishes the PCs to explore. The Wendigo's claustrophobia will not allow it to pursue the PCs underground. Even if the Wendigo is vanquished, it might still haunt the PCs in subsequent encounters, taking the form of its children, the mosquitoes. Thank you for listening to this audio reading of Wind Chill, published in Dungeon Magazine issue 77. I hope you enjoyed and have a great day. Best regards, Reed.